The Green Bay Packers missed out on DK Metcalf and Davante Adams, and free agency hasn't even started. Where do they go from here?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how, thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet, assuming you win it. You had high hopes. You had high hopes. You gave yourself a chance to believe in something, to believe the Packers could make a big move for a wide receiver. Davante Adams, DK Metcalf. Well, if they make a big move for a receiver, it's not going to be one of those two. DK Metcalf headed to Pittsburgh. They are sending the 52nd overall pick to the Seattle Seahawks, and then giving DK Metcalf $30 million a year. 5 years, $150 million. Let's start here. I don't think the Packers were ever going to give their second round pick to pay DK Metcalf $130 million. And even if they were going to do that, their second round pick is not as good as Pittsburgh's second round pick. So could they have thrown in some sweetener? Sure, maybe they could have, but they didn't want to pay that much anyway, given how much they were going to have to pay to DK Metcalf. So that's the first part. The second part is, and I loved the fit for DK Metcalf. I said I don't think he would be worth it for most teams at $30 million. I think he would have been worth it for the Packers at $30 million. Maybe I'm wrong. That is the way that I felt. And I know that I would say from the mainstream, higher on the fit than most were. And now, of course, there's this, reporting that they never offered for DK Metcalf. What I reported is that there was a conversation, that they had talked. Didn't say anything about an offer. Just want to make that clear. Okay, great. Now we handled that. So they didn't get DK Metcalf. The problem was that news came shortly after the news that Davante Adams was headed to LA on exactly the kind of deal that I said was going to happen. 2 years, $46 million, worth $46 million, with $26 million guaranteed. That's according to Ian Rappaport's reporting. That's the Mike Evans deal with inflation, which is what we said he was likely to get. Now, we also got some reporting the Packers didn't even reach out to Davante Adams. So, what's the plan? What is the plan exactly? And I am not going to get on this show today and tell you not to be upset. I am not going to get on the show and tell you not to feel what you feel, I assume, deeply about missing out on one of these two guys. You, no doubt, got your hopes up. And so I get it. It sucks. It sucks to feel like the Packers are finally going to do the thing that a lot of people have been asking them to do for years. And they didn't do it. So, if that's how you are processing all of this, go do it. I want to remind you, though, that there's a lot of time between now and September. And I pointed this out on social media. I think it bears repeating. This time last year, the Philadelphia Eagles were coming off getting their doors blown off by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not the eventual Super Bowl champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in the first round at home. Blown out. Blown out. And heading into the offseason, linebackers, they didn't have any. Who's playing in the secondary exactly? Darius Slay, and we're not sure. Would the offensive line coalesce? You're losing your all-world center. You got to replace your right guard. I remember hearing all offseason, hey, that's an underrated loss, Jason Kelce. I probably said it on this show. Saquon Barkley, what are they doing? That's weird. Huh. They got Zach Bond off the scrap heap. Mekhi Becton worked beyond anyone's expectations. They bring CJ Gardner-Johnson back on a cheap deal. They didn't do anything that crazy. Like the Saquon Barkley deal was a dice roll, to be sure. But behind that offensive line. And look, I said this on X, I will repeat it. The Eagles could have signed Josh Jacobs and won the Super Bowl. Like they could have. Saquon Barkley was incredible and it was a great story. They could have signed Josh Jacobs and won the Super Bowl. They probably could have signed a less good player than Josh Jacobs and won the Super Bowl. Josh Jacobs was a top 5 running back last year, no doubt. So it's one of those things where I want to remind you there's a long way to go. And by the time you listen to this, there's a chance something has happened. The Packers have signed someone. Because this whole narrative that they're cheap, oh, they're just going to just bargain bin. It's not true. It's not true. Go back and look. Top of the market contract, Jimmy Graham at tight end. They paid the two most expensive pass rushers. They paid at the top of the market, not the top of the pass rush market entirely, but real high-end money for the Smith brothers. Adrian Amos was a top 5 or 6 paid safety when the Packers signed him. Xavier McKinney was the highest paid safety. Josh Jacobs, one of the highest paid running backs. The Packers shop at designer stores in free agency under Brian Gutekunst. And let's not forget, Brian Gutekunst has also, and Russ Ball, handed out the biggest contract ever 3 times. Not once, not twice, 3 times. Aaron Rodgers in 2018, Aaron Rodgers in 2022, and Jordan Love this past offseason. They spend money. Also extended Jair Alexander. Top of the cornerback market, extended David Bakhtiari. Top of the left tackle market. Those are expensive markets to be paying top dollar for. They retained Devondre Campbell for a big money linebacker deal that did not work out. By the way, a lot of those signings did not work out. There is, though, this question now of where can you go? Where can you go at receiver? I've heard Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I guess that's not a particularly compelling option to me. I would like to see, we'll see what happens with Romeo Doubs. I would like to see him used more vertically. I'd like to see Jaden Reed more as an outside receiver. I think the players on this roster can do a lot of the things that they need. Dontavian Wicks, not a burner. Speed is not highly correlated to deep success. Jordy Nelson ran 4.57. Devante Adams ran 4.56. They can win down the field. One of the best things Wicks did at Virginia was win vertically. He hasn't been asked to do that very much with the Packers, though he can win on those deep over routes, sail routes. He can do that. Big posts. He can be an explosive receiver for this team. They're going to have to reorient this offense, and there are going to be opportunities for them to add to this room. I don't think free agency is the place to do it. Like, this is not, pivot to Amari Cooper. No. Amari Cooper was just not good enough to be the Bills' number 1 receiver. I don't know that he fundamentally changes the Packers' life. I would rather give Dontavian Wicks more opportunities. I'd rather find out if Jaden Reed can play on the boundary. I'd rather, use Tucker Kraft more. I'd rather use Josh Jacobs more in the passing game. Don't forget, this was a top 5 offense last year, 3rd in passing offense by DVOA, 7th in EPA per dropback. This Jordan Love, I believe, was 5th in EPA per dropback. Certainly top 10 in EPA per dropback. I had the numbers in front of me. This offense is really good. And they were better in 2023, and weird things happened in 2024. Now, there's still a lot out there that can happen. And I hate to spend 8 or 9 minutes talking about all the things, but because by the time you listen to this, like DJ Reed may have signed on this team, and this person may have gone on this team, and this person. But let's put together a roadmap here together for understanding no DK Metcalf, no Davante Adams. How can this still be a productive offseason and free agency period in particular for the Green Bay Packers? We'll talk about it next. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back. And then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention so they can work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress. And that means you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now that is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So if the Packers cannot play in this pool for receiver, I do think they have some options in the draft. We will talk about them at the end. We are still going to do a mock draft Monday because I don't want this whole show to be preempted within an hour of you listening to it. So when we came into this offseason, I think the idea was 3 big priorities here. Find a receiver who can get this team a bucket. Add bodies at corner, preferably high-end bodies, but you always want the best players you can get. And find impact pass rush. Brian Gutekunst was adamant at the Combine. We have to do a better job rushing with 4. And we had the A to Z Sports report that Dayo Adehengbo from Indianapolis would be high on the Packers priority list. That is something that I had heard as well. And then Malcolm Kuntz is another name to keep an eye on here. But the market is crazy. And the pass rush market just exploded with Myles Garrett getting $40 million. Max Crosby got $33 million. Like, if you want Josh Sweat, it's going to cost 20 plus. So that's just the reality. So for the Packers, where are you willing to go? What you have to do here is if you can't get the receiver, if you have to wait and figure out another plan there, then the concern has to be corner and edge. And there are corners to be had. 3 names that I think if the Packers signed any of these 3, you go, good. For almost regardless of the price, because you're going to have to pay a free agency tax. The cap is going up. That's life. DJ Reed, Charvarius Ward, and Paulson Adebo are the names to watch. And I think all 3 would be terrific pieces. Like, you go, okay, Keyshawn Nixon showed enough last year. He can be a starting boundary corner on a good defense. We just saw it. Carrington Valentine, he can be a starting boundary corner on a good defense. We just saw it. They didn't lose. Like, point to me out the games that they lost because of their corners. Even the games where they gave up points, a lot of it can be traced back to the fact that they could not rush the passer. So I think you could make the argument that what they need to do is add 1, maybe 2 pass rushers. Like, you go get Chase Young and Khalil Mack. Sounds like Joey Bosa is headed towards San Francisco. And then a lower end corner signing, someone more like Paulson Adebo and less like DJ Reed or Charvarius Ward, who we are expecting to command much higher price tags. Adebo's coming off a serious leg injury, but had a really good, was playing really, really well. I really like his fit in Green Bay. I liked him pre-draft. And so this is a little bit of me confirming my priors. I understand that. I'm going to be transparent about that part. Same with DJ Reed. I just love DJ Reed. I think he's great. I reported in the Leap that there was a feeling among some folks that I talked to he'd be a great fit in Green Bay. I think for the price point, $15-ish million. Yeah, that works. And then the pass rush part of this. Like if you wanted to go high end corner, I think you can do that. Get 1 and 1, and then you go into the draft going, anything goes. You can do you gotta get a receiver, preferably with speed. But you've added the corner, you've added the pass rusher. That frees you up. That's what you want to be. You want to go into the draft feeling like you are freed up to target key areas on your team. By adding Xavier McKinney last year, the Packers did not lock themselves into having to draft a particular type of safety. Now, they still needed bodies. And, they didn't add at linebacker. So they went into the draft knowing they were going to have to add a linebacker. I think they can have a similar situation here where you sign a corner, you sign a pass rusher, you go in knowing, okay, you could always use more pass rush. And you'd like to add some playmaking at receiver. But other than that, you're pretty free to just let the board come to you. And I think that's always where you want to be as a team. And this Packers team, look, they're expecting Brenton Cox to take a step forward this year. They're expecting Lucas Van Ness to take a step forward. You can't bank on that. So Josh Sweat, Chase Young, Khalil Mack, Malcolm Kuntz. To me, those are the names to keep an eye on here for the Packers with the pass rush. If they come out of this week with 2 of those guys that I mentioned, a corner and a pass rusher, this team will be better than it was last year. And I know it's weird, like their defense played really well at the end of the season. They played their best game, one of their best games, I think, in that Eagles game. Edrin Cooper playing out of his mind. You add impact pass rush, you add impact corner to this team. This team can win with defense and running the ball next year. Like you want to talk about limiting the impact that a wide receiver 1 has on a game. Well, if teams can't score more than 14 points, 17 points, they lost to the Lions in a game that the Lions scored 34. Well, if the Lions scored 30, the Packers win. So this is how math works. I don't make the rules. I don't always understand all the rules, but I do know that 31 is more than 30. So if you can beat teams 24-20, that's great. That's great. The Packers in almost any game where they are remotely healthy are going to get to 24, 27 points. If you can add the real, like this defense, there was some smoke and mirrors-y stuff going on. And they were playing at a really high level. That's a credit to Jeff Hafley. But also, this is why Brian Gutekunst is like, look, I can't cater to Jeff Hafley. I did not mention Hassan Reddick. I probably should have. I would be interested in Hassan Reddick if I were the Packers. But what if the Packers defense plays really well again and Jeff Hafley gets interviews? And he's really good, and he's really good in those interviews, and he's probably going to be really good in those interviews. And then he gets a head coaching job. And now you've got like this undersized pass rusher that isn't going to work if, the system is different and requires different things. Now, look, if you switch back to a 3-4, probably be okay. But I'm just saying the Packers have these types for a reason. It's because they're theoretically scheme versatile. And I understand that part of it. So there's still ways for this team to get better and set themselves up well for the draft. They're just unlikely to find an impact skill position player here unless someone shakes loose that we just haven't heard about. Tyler Lockett, could you bring him in? He can still run. Maybe just to have a veteran. If you like him better than Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I guess maybe I kind of would. But it just doesn't seem like the kind of thing Brian Gutekunst is at all interested in doing. But again, if you add these defensive pieces, you get a pass rusher. And I haven't even mentioned Trey Hendrickson. It sounds like you can get Trey Hendrickson for a day 2 pick. So if you trade a second round pick for Trey Hendrickson, I think for the Packers, like for fans, all is forgiven. Like if there's still a big move coming, my feeling would be that would forgive whatever sins have supposedly been committed at this point. I look, again, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I'm like, if you can go get Trey Hendrickson, yeah, go do it. Also, I didn't even mention, like, could Brandon Ayuk be available? Could you get Brandon Ayuk for your second round pick? I don't know, man. It seems like that's still kind of out there that could happen. That's weird. What is going on in San Francisco? Bizarre. Micah Parsons, there's like that report of like, hey, it's $40 million. Like, I would call on Micah Parsons in a heartbeat. So who knows what could shake loose? Like we are getting close to NBA levels of player movement here, or at least player intrigue. This week is going to be fun. The Packers are going to do some stuff. They're going to do some stuff. I hate to even phrase it as like they can still salvage this, because they're not salvaging anything. This was a really good football team last year. And I think it is too often lost based on how the season ended, and the Bears game, the Vikings game, and the Eagles game. On balance, this team was really good last year. And I do expect some of the guys who did not quite take steps forward or who took steps back, in the case of guys like Dontavian Wicks, I think it's reasonable to say there's still talent there to believe in if you're the Packers. My guess is it's why ultimately they didn't decide to try and use any of those guys as trade pieces. Okay, so they make a couple moves. You go into the draft. What do? I wrote about this, by the way, today for The Leap, based on, if X, then Y. So let's do a mock draft Monday about it. And we'll do it live on the show next on Locked On Packers. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything you need, for buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, as I always do. FanDuel makes it easy to pick them with the spreads, the totals, the game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple, it's easy to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. I just get it. It just goes into my bank account. It's a wonderful thing. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, so we have our mock draft Monday, and the Packers, at this point, no big moves. Let's just say, for sake of argument, because by the time you listen to this, we'll know for sure. One thing I do want to quick mention before this gets going in earnest. I wonder if defensive line-wise, the Packers are going to lean into Kenny Clark at the nose, let TJ Slayton walk, and try and unleash Carl Brooks and Devante Wyatt, get those two guys on the field, Wyatt and Clark, or Clark and Brooks, more often. But I wonder how that impacts the way that they're going to draft. Okay, here we go. Packers pick at 23. Best players on the board. Malachi Starks, safety from Georgia. Don't think that's going to be a thing. James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. Undersized. I would be surprised if he was the pick in the first round. If he fell to them in the second round, I could see that if he fell to 55. So Luther Burden, to me, not the kind of player that I think they would take that first round gamble on, even if I think this is an opportunity potentially for them to draft a first round receiver. In a situation like this, I would just take Jaden Higgins and call it good. I think he's the better player. I think he's the more complete player. I think he fits what they need. Luther Burden, I think he's become an overlooked player, frankly. He's still only 21 years old. Is he the kind of guy that the Packers would go, we're gonna kind of break our path, our history here for? I'm not convinced. But look, Derek Harmon is here. I've mocked Derek Harmon a million times. There's depth here. The more I watch these receivers, the less depth I think there is. And so I actually do think if they're going to do it, now is the time. And so let's just, for sake of fun, I think there's a real chance they could take a receiver in the first round. I really like Luther Burden for diversity's sake, because I haven't not done this yet. Let's take Burden and just see how this all shakes out. Okay, so we get here and we're left with Shamar Turner, Alfred Collins, Braden Swinson, JTT from Ohio State, Darian Porter, the corner from Iowa State, Jared Ivey, who's an edge I really like from Ole Miss, who hasn't tested, but I'm interested to see how he does test. I think you have to go with the front, unless they have, maybe even if they have the Trey Hendrickson deal. I think pass rush has to be at the top of the plan here. He is 6'4", 255, long arms, not a hulking guy. Didn't test incredibly well, but tested decently well. He is, I think, an underrated player in this draft. I know that the tape grinders really like him. Ooh, this is tough. This is tough. I think that's I like that. Let's do that. Because if you want a good pass rusher, you got to get one early. I think this draft, this offseason is going to be about pass rush for the Packers. If they sign, like I mentioned earlier, Chase Young and a Khalil Mack, if they do that, probably not going to do this. They probably take a defensive tackle. I don't have that information. I'm assuming they're not going to do that. So I'm going to take Braden Swinson here from LSU and then hope that there's a corner here that I like, or an offensive lineman maybe that I like. There are some offensive linemen here. Tate Ratledge from Georgia. Charles Grant from William and Mary is an interesting one. There isn't a corner here that I feel great about. Jacob Parrish is undersized for the Packers, but someone that I frankly like. You guys know that I like Noel Williams here. Jordan Phillips from Maryland is available here. This is going to come out and be a not very sexy mock if I stick with a lot of the best player available. I think Jacob Parrish, I know he's undersized, but tested extremely well. 198. He's under 5'10", but he's like tenths shorter than Jair Alexander. The question would be, do they think he can play outside? And I would guess not. Now, CJ West, defensive tackle from Indiana, is here. Someone that I think they will really like. I don't know if that's too early. I kind of don't care. He's probably more like a 4th round player. This is why these draft boards take a while to iron out. What should I do? What should I do? There's Savion Williams from TCU, the receiver, is there. Devin Neal, the running back from Kansas, is there. I do think the Packers are going to take a running back on day 3. Harold Fannin Jr. is here. Oh, Jared Wilson, the center, from Georgia. Ranks 97th percentile in PFF's game athleticism score. Let's do that. They need an offensive lineman. and they already signed a corner. People are going to go, what is this? So to recap, Luther Burden III in the first round. Braden Swinson, pass rusher on the edge from LSU in the second. Jared Wilson, the center from Georgia in the third round. Was that what you were expecting? Probably not. We will be back, if anything happens, live. So the Packers make a trade, live. The Packers sign a big name free agent, live. Even if they sign a middling free agent, we'll go live. Okay? Live. We'll do it live. So subscribe on YouTube to hang out with us live. And in your podcast feed, make sure you are subscribed. It will come in as soon as we can get it up. So follow me on all the social medias to not miss a minute of all of it. And you can stay locked on Packers.